Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Abderholden. I'm the Executive Director here at NAMI, Minnesota, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And our mission is really to improve the lives of both children and adults with mental illnesses and their families. And we do that by providing education, support, and advocacy. You know, when you or a loved one develops a mental illness, people really have no idea what to do. They don't know where to start. They're worried about what other people might think. And so we really try to kind of address those issues. So we do a lot of public awareness training. We're really moving away from using the word stigma around mental illness. It's really about discrimination. People are afraid to share that they're struggling, you know, whether they're in college or with their employer or anything like that, because they're afraid that they're going to face discrimination. And so stigma is more internalizing, but we're really talking about external forces impacting someone. And so we have a program called In Our Own Voice, where people who live with a mental illness share their stories, both in terms of the dark days, but also the hopeful days. And I think seeing someone, share their story in front of you who might look like you or have a similar kind of story or experience really breaks down those barriers and takes those bricks off that wall. The other thing is we have something called 5 Things You Can Do. So we want to make sure that people understand kind of the attitudes that people are facing and what you can do as an individual. One of the exercises we throw out there is we ask people to yell out all of the slang words for mental illness. And there's a lot, right? Psycho, nuts, things like that. But then what are the slang words for heart disease, diabetes? There aren't any. And while you might say, well, it's kind of the word police, right? You know, we can use the word crazy. But if you have a young person who's experiencing psychosis for the first time, perhaps hearing voices, they're really afraid that someone's going to call them crazy. And we don't want them to think that. We want them to understand that what they're experiencing is a symptom of a mental illness and that they can, in fact, seek treatment. So we do those kind of public awareness presentations, but we also do education. So especially as a family member, you know, if your loved one develops serious depression or bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anxiety, eating disorder, any of those kinds of things, you honestly don't know what to do. And I have many families that I talk to and they're like, well, you know, I'm trying to get them to understand that, you know, that they're not well, that they have a mental illness. I'm like, you're not going to convince them of that if they don't think so. So you have to do a different strategy. So our classes really help people understand the brain, understand mental illnesses, understand the strategies that work, and understand the resources that in fact are available in the community. We also do suicide prevention. So we know suicide is a leading cause of death, you know, the top 3 to 5, depending on the age group. And there are things that each of us can take to really prevent suicide. And so we offer these classes, of course, right now on Zoom, but they're free in the community. So it's kind of like most of us know basic first aid. We need to know basic suicide prevention. And so again, those classes are offered usually throughout the state and right now, of course, on Zoom. We also have peer-led support groups. And so we have ones for people with a mental illness, we have ones for family members, and also for parents who have a child with a mental illness. And you know, there's nothing more healing than talking to someone who's walked in your shoes. You know, and so when you're sharing with someone, you know, whether you're in our anxiety support group and you're talking to other people who also live with that, you're in the parent group and you're talking to other parents whose children are struggling with their mental illness, it's kind of affirming, right, that you're not alone. And those support groups, you know, right now, of course, they are all on Zoom, but they also have ones for young adults because the issue for a 21-year-old is very different than for a 50-year-old. We have ones for actually people whose spouses or partners are living with a mental illness because that issue is different than if you have a child. So please feel free to check out those support groups. They're all free and all of our leaders go through training. I do think the other thing that is helpful is when you see someone leading a support group who either lives with a mental illness or also has a family member, it gives you hope because you see someone who has made it through, right, and who is giving back to the community. And I think those are really important things. We also run a helpline. We get over 4,000 calls a year. So navigating the mental health system, sometimes the criminal justice system is just not easy. And so they call in and we provide kind of information and resources and we teach people how to be a good advocate for themselves. You can't call a county agency and expect that they're going to listen to you for 45 minutes. Just not going to happen. And so we help people kind of shape their stories, focus on the 1 to 2 to 3 top issues that they need to deal with. And it's not a crisis line, it's a helpline. And so it's open during normal business hours. The other thing we do is legislative advocacy. So it is important to change public attitudes, but we also need to change public laws. Right now, we're in the throes of the legislative session, working on a number of different issues, really to continue to build our mental health system. We like to say that if you look at the history, our mental health system isn't broken. We never had one. And so what we're doing is identifying what works, eliminating barriers to access and treatment, trying to build our mental health workforce, and really promote early intervention and identification as well. Lastly, I just want to say that, you know, right now during the pandemic in particular, I think most people have had a couple of days, if not weeks or months, where they've struggled with depression and anxiety. And this is actually, we're having a normal response to an abnormal world. You know, it's been a year now. And I think in the beginning, most people thought, we can do this for 4 to 6 weeks. Not a problem. We're going to hunker down. We're going to stay in our house. We're going to wear a mask. We're going to be fine. And after about 6 weeks, we realized it was not going to be 6 weeks, that it was going to be, you know, perhaps months. And then, of course, it's turned into a year. And so not knowing, right, having no idea when this endpoint is, has created a lot of anxiety in people. And on top of that, if you think about it, we have people who've lost their jobs, which is really difficult. We have parents trying to teach their children from home with distance learning. And if you have a child who's in special education, you're not getting the help that that child needs as well. You have people who are worried that they're going to catch COVID because they're working in kind of essential jobs, or that they're going to give it to their family members. You have people who are alone. They're living alone. They're not interacting with people. That's a really difficult thing. But also, quite honestly, none of us are used to being with our families 24/7. And that can be just as hard as being alone. So we have all these pressures. And the one other thing, and I think this is especially true for teenagers, is we have what I would call ambiguous loss. So we haven't been able to hold weddings, or at least to the extent that we wanted them. Kids lost their graduation parties. Perhaps they were graduating, you know, first in their family from college. People didn't get to see them walk across the stage. We haven't held funerals, and the grieving process, funerals are really, really important so that you're crying and laughing as you tell the story of someone's life. So we have that loss. That's also a really important piece of all of this. So, you know, we've all experienced some bad times. And I would also venture to say that most of us have been pretty hard on ourselves too, that we're not living up to what we should be doing, that our work maybe isn't as productive. It's a pandemic. Of course you're not as productive, right? Of course you've been feeling some, you know, depression and anxiety. We are all feeling that way. And so we really want to encourage people to use strategies to decrease that stress, right? So moving a few minutes a day can get those endorphins going in your brain and help you feel better, whether it's dancing stupidly in your kitchen with your kids or taking a walk around the block. Now that the sun has finally come out and it's a little bit warmer, do those things to help. I would really encourage people to slow down on the alcohol. Alcohol is a depressant, and we know that people have really been drinking a lot lately. It's not going to really make you feel better. And the other thing is to really try to connect with others. When someone's really feeling depressed, they're not going to reach out. You need to reach in. So if you're worried about someone, just check in with them, and don't just say, how are you, right? Talk about something else. I think actually right now we should ban that question from our vocabulary, because how do you really want to answer that, right? No one wants to say, I'm doing great. I don't think anyone's been saying that. So you just want to really be careful about that. And then, you know, the other thing is to do what I call grace and space. We need to give ourselves some grace for not being perfect during this time. We need to give others grace for maybe screwing up, whether it's not moving at a, you know, when the light turns green, forgetting their mask in a store, you know, not doing the 6 feet distance, whatever it might be. Grace and space, right? Because it's a difficult time for everyone. And, you know, I also find that if I'm not responding to anger with anger, I actually feel better, right? If someone's really upset and I'm responding kind of with compassion and grace, I don't get upset. My heart rate isn't moving up or anything like that. So grace and space are two words that I think we really need to use right now. And if you were struggling, with depression or anxiety or other symptoms of a mental illness before the pandemic hit, I know it's been a really hard time for you. And so, again, I want you to kind of think about that kind of positive self talk and not negative self talk. What we all have been, frankly, is survivors. We are all survivors right now. And I think we have to kind of give ourselves a pat on the back for that, and just really acknowledge we've been through a tough time. And, a lot of people who have been living with a mental illness learned a lot of strategies to cope with extreme stress. Pull those strategies out and work on them. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you virtually tonight. I hope it's a great event. I appreciate all the work that you do. And, give us a call if you have any questions. Our phone number is 651-645-2948. And go to our website, tons of resources on our websites, www.namimnforminnesota.org.